EAGLES, Eagles.
Eagles fans, what's good? It's your guy, Tone DeShields II. I'm joined with John McMullen. This is Football 24/7. Make sure you guys smash that like button. Make sure you guys continue to stay engaged in the content. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed to the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. We always appreciate the love and affection that you guys provide on a daily basis on the JAKIB Sports YouTube channel. You guys know John McMullen is our Eagles insider, one of the best covering the Philadelphia Eagles in this market right now. One of the best in the country, in my opinion, and I'm willing to bet my bottom dollar on that. But that's just me. That's just my objective opinion. But John, we're a few days removed from this Philadelphia Eagles game. They managed to go down to Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, and they managed to pretty much dominate the Tampa Bay Buccaneers from beginning to end, outside of just one drive where Mike Evans was able to make some impact. But overall, the Philadelphia Eagles dominated that matchup, dominated time of possession, the yard battle, turnover, so on and so forth. So, we saw this defense really play better than we thought they would. And the offense is still going through its hiccups, right? So I'm curious, knowing what we know, seeing what we've seen thus far, are you one to say, or are you one to believe the Eagles defense is much further ahead of the offense? How do you go about dissecting that?
No, I think coming into this game, I think the Eagles were 29th or something in pass defense. And obviously they're very good. They've been very good in run defense. Now, they had a better game, obviously better all around game in Tampa Bay. They gave up a lot of obviously passing yardage to Minnesota, which is understandable. The Vikings got behind and were throwing the football a lot. You have Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson. So some of that skewed as well. But, I think overall it's been a very good run defense. And if you can hold the pass rush at bay, which nobody has been able to, I think the Eagles can be had on the back end, so to speak. That didn't obviously manifest itself in Tampa. And probably won't get a decent test until maybe Matthew Stafford, but the Rams don't have a ton of talent. But certainly Miami in a couple weeks down the road will certainly test that. We can maybe get a better feel for where they are. Problem is now Justin Evans is hurt. We'll see how that shakes out during the week. Sidney Brown hurt his hamstring. So the Eagles have some more injuries in a secondary that's already dealing with some injuries. So that's a concern. But overall, I think the Eagles have been, people say the offense isn't doing well. I was just looking at it when you were saying that. The offense is graded overall. The PFF has the Eagles as the third best team behind Miami and San Francisco. So they're number 3. Offensively,
is that just best team overall, or like what's the metric?
This is best. That was best team overall, number 3. Offensively, they're number 6. Defensively, they're number 10, which is, anytime you're in the top 10, that's good. So 6, they're actually better offensively, but I think people are talking about the passing offense.
Mm-hmm.
The running offense has been it's been unbelievable.
But what do you say to the people who feel like this passing offense is performing exceedingly below expectations? I mean, that's pretty much where we are at that point in the season. I feel like a lot of people, including myself, we compare what's going on thus far to what we've seen last season. And granted, it's only been 3 games this year. There's still a lot that has to happen. But, when you think about the expectations for this offense coming into the season, I know the analytics say one thing, but the eye test says another, right?
Well, I think people are grading on a curve to what they want to see because, a lot of people didn't like the former defensive coordinator, but technically, I mean, they're below where they were last year. They were the number two defense in the NFL, number one passing defense. And as I said, they came in 29th in passing defense. The sacks are down. They're winning football games like they won football games last year. The defensive front is carrying them. Offensively, they had the third ranked offense, and they haven't played up to that level yet, except in the running aspect. But I expect them to keep improving as the season goes along because they remain one of the best teams in football, and this is a small sample size. But yeah, I mean, the defense has been Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox, et cetera, et cetera. Josh Sweat has been the front, which has been tremendous. And then the back end, not so tremendous. But it's not showing, and that's, it's complimentary. As long as that front masks the issues in the back end. As long as that continues, you don't have a problem. Are you going to have a problem down the road? And hopefully you can get the Sidney Browns of the world up to speed. His hamstring issue, I was told, is not that serious, but this is a short week. I don't expect him to be out a lot, but he might not be in the game against Washington. I think they can persevere. And that's why I point to that Miami game. Miami's been off the charts offensively. And if Tyreek Hill is healthy at that point and Jalen Waddle and everything else they got, that's a test. That's a test. And we'll see how they hold up. But let's see, just coverage wise, let's see. PFF improved him to number 20 this week, and that's after a good game.
But aren't we?
They haven't been great in the back end.
Fair enough, right? I mean, most of the talent is clearly, with the front four, clearly. But all things considered, aren't we technically grading this defense on a curve as well? Because I mean, they battled injuries. They've had some pretty significant losses in the offseason. T.J. Edwards, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Javon Hargrave. A lot of people say Jalen Carter is the perfect replacement. I would tend to agree. But again, this defense, all things considered, I mean, we expected, and again, that were expectations, we expected this defense to kind of take some time to get things, pretty much together. But to me, at least, it seems like they're playing a lot better given, their deficiencies, especially with the DBs and the linebacker core.
Well, that is, if you're saying that's grading on a curve. You don't expect as much out of the defense as the offense,
and that's my main thing, right? It's kind of flipped.
which is fair when you come into the season. But earlier said it was playing better than the offense. I don't know if that's necessarily true. The offense is playing differently, but again, Nick Sirianni said it. I don't know what they had against Minnesota, well over 400 yards, almost 450 or so. Same thing here, well over 400 yards. Doesn't matter how you get the yards. I mean, I that's pretty good.
I hear you, but still, right? There's still something herky-jerky about this offense, right?
Well, passing wise, they haven't needed to be a good passing offense. Now, week one, obviously, he had some weather issues. In New England. And then since then, they've been pretty good, but they've just been running the football. Now, why are they been running the football? Well, Dallas Goedert talked about it today. They're seeing these weird, exotic defenses from not only Bill Belichick, but Brian Flores and now Todd Bowles. He expects that to slow down. And I think it will slow down starting with Washington. I think you'll see more traditional defenses, and the passing game will probably pick up. And by the way, I don't think people want it to pick up because when you run the football like the Eagles, That means you're ahead 25-11 in the fourth quarter, and you're trying to run out the clock with a 9-minute and 22-second drive. Again, people have to reassess their goals, and they should listen to Jalen Hurts. Win. They've won 20 of 21 with Jalen Hurts as the starting quarterback. 20 of 21. You know how hard that is to do in the NFL? 10 in a row on the road over that span. On the road. 10 consecutive. You know, style points. Hey, go follow Miami. You can get your style points.
Understood. You know, there's still something about Jalen Hurts' game right now that seems to me he's not as fluid as he was last year. And again, like you said, you know, at this point in the season, you know, as long as you're winning and you're still growing, I mean, if you can win and still grow and handle things behind the scenes at the same time, why not, right? If you can work on some things and still win, a lot of teams don't have that luxury. The Eagles are so talented. You know, in my opinion, you know, they're pretty well coached as well, but they're so talented that they're able to overcome certain deficiencies and still win, you know, pretty important matchups. I think this is such an important part of their schedule because I think they really need to stack these wins, especially with the schedule getting much more difficult. And I think that begins with the Miami Dolphins, like you mentioned. Staying on Jalen Hurts, though, versus the Bucs, 23 for 37, 277 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, 62% completion percentage. You know, he has 4 turnovers over the course of 3 games, which is pretty uncharacteristic for him. And again, like I mentioned, he hasn't really seemed like himself over the past few games. They're clearly still working some things out with the coordinator position. But Boomer Esiason said something pretty interesting on the National Football Show with Dan Sileo. He said, you know, well, first and foremost, he is a fan of Jalen Hurts, but he said something pretty interesting about Jalen Hurts so far through these through games. He said Jalen has to learn how to play with the contract. That was pretty interesting to me. Before I give my opinion, I'm curious to know what do you think that means?
You know, everybody can have their opinion. If you know, some people bring in he's trying to protect himself because of what he's getting paid. That doesn't make any sense to me because he's already gotten paid. So, you know, he's gotten to the point where I just don't think he's played as well. And he had the flu on Monday night. And, you know, he kind of persevered through. But, you know, this to me is why, and part of it is the defense, is what Dallas Goedert said. And I think that starts to lighten up this week. And I think he has been a little bit uncertain with some new unscouted looks. I think that's part of it. And again, you go back to the weather, at least early in the game in New England. That's part of it. So hasn't been a great sort of lineup to start the passing game in a high level. And I think he'll get incrementally better. As far as, I mean, yeah, I don't know. You'd have to ask what he meant by that because, you know, playing with a contract to me would be easier after you got it than before you got it.
Right. I would tend to agree with that as well. You tend to play a little tighter. You know what? It's interesting because this is what I thought he meant by that, right? I'm looking at it like this. You know, even as zeroed in as Jalen Hurts is, he's still a person that eats, breathes, sleeps like everybody else, right? And we all handle expectation relatively differently. I think what he meant by that was, yes, Jalen Hurts, you know, you've positioned yourself in a way where people are starting to expect a certain level of performance from you. On top of that, with the contract comes great responsibility and expectations from your organization, so on and so forth. I don't think he necessarily was saying it like a bad thing. I think he was saying it more so it comes with, you know, maturity and developing as a veteran quarterback. You know, when you get these big contracts, we've seen players play a little differently after they get paid. And that's not saying Jalen Hurts is not focused, but there's a certain level of weight or expectation that comes with the investment people make in you. And I think that's what he's thinking about in terms of Jalen Hurts balancing that.
Well, Jalen, for the most part, he is a human being. Sometimes he seems like a robot, but he is a human being. So I'm sure he does hear some of what he would call rat poison, out there. I'm sure some of it seeps through, but he doesn't strike me as the type of person that cares about others' expectations. He, he's been pretty consistent in winning football games, and he's been pretty consistent in saying, doesn't matter how you win, as long as you get to the finish line. Nick Sirianni talked about it again. We got to throw it 50 times today. We'll throw it 50 times. We got to run it. We'll run it 50 times. But we live in a fantasy football world, and I keep bringing up, Justin Herbert set a bunch of records over the weekend. They barely won a game against an 0-3 team. Does it really matter that he completed 90% of his passes for 400 yards? They won 27-24. The other team, who they beat, has a receiver on pace to shatter every all-time record in the history of this league, and they can't win a game. What do people want? Fantasy football numbers or wins? I think that's an argument that you could say fantasy football numbers for a lot of people. I mean, the Eagles can throw for 300 yards every week. Probably not going to win every week. It's easy. I always make the NBA comparison. NBA players, most NBA players, most shooting guards, guys with any kind of talent that aren't, role players or, just there to rebound or play defense, can score 20 points a game if you let them. They might need 40 shots to get there, but they'll score 20.
Right.
So, yeah, I said this on the radio today, whether people know it or not, these are the glory days of Philadelphia Eagles football. They have won 20, let me say this again, 20 of 21 games with Jalen Hurts as the starting quarterback. 20 of 21 games. 10 in a row on the road. 20 of 21 games. This team has become
that record is beginning in 2022, right?
Yeah, his last 21 starts. Yeah.
Okay, okay. I am of the mindset that there is a lot of overreaction going on surrounding the Philadelphia Eagles offense. Although there's certain things we want to see, right? And a lot of people want to win those debates with their friends about whose quarterback is the best, all that kind of stuff, right? I don't get too wrapped up into that. Again, I'm of the mindset that it's early in the season. Super Bowl offenses aren't created in 3 weeks, right? You have to go through trials and tribulations, and you have to face certain levels of adversity. And there are going to be moments where the league catches up to what you're doing, and you're going to have to pivot or adjust or revamp, retool what you're doing. And I think that's kind of where the Philadelphia Eagles are right now. Again, they're 3-0. And I'm of the mindset when you pay a quarterback, you're paying for wins and not for passing titles. That's just me, though. Despite the passing attack struggling, I think it better serves the Philadelphia Eagles that they're not peaking too early. We've seen what that looks like before when teams kind of shoot their load pretty early in the season and then things kind of, fall by the wayside. For example, the Buffalo Bills, last year, they started off pretty hot. They were blowing teams out. They were kind of just unleashing every piece of weaponry in their arsenal. But then they kind of tailed off. Like there was something off about that team, even though they won 13 games. There was still something off about that team heading into the playoffs, and we saw how that panned out. So again, you don't win Super Bowls in the first 3 weeks. You win it in the playoffs, right? So, maybe all this overreaction needs to be put to the wayside, especially knowing who the quarterback is and how he approaches everything, and knowing that winning is the main thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get caught up in other people's overreactions. I mean, all I can look at is this team and the fact of what they do on each particular week. That game, I looked up in that game and I said, and I told Jody this morning, they didn't even play well. And it's the fourth quarter, and I look down, and they're out gaining Tampa about 400-99, and they didn't even play well. So, I mean, people, again, when I look at the rankings and the power rankings, and people say Miami's done it for 3 games. They've been tremendous, but I mean, this team's been doing it for 2 years. Last year and into this year. More of a proven commodity. San Francisco's more of a proven commodity. So those are probably your 2 best teams to this point. But it's a matter of the stars on this team, the real superstars on this team are the offensive line and defensive line. And, that's not sexy. And Howie Roseman talks about it every time when he takes an offensive line. Everybody craps on him. When they drafted Cam Jurgens, everybody wanted Nakobe Dean. How could you not take Nakobe Dean? How could you not take Nakobe Dean? They ultimately got Nakobe Dean, so it didn't matter in the 3rd round. But look at Cam Jurgens now. Look at the way he's playing in the first 3 games of the season. And I said this, every GM should look at Howie Roseman, how he has built this roster and tried their best to copy it foundationally. I brought up the Chargers and the Vikings. You cannot win no matter who you have in the skill positions if you can't block people. I say it all the time. You can't win, at least consistently.
I don't think people understand what Howie Roseman has done over the past decade is really what he's built on both sides of the ball in the trenches, offensive line, defensive line. What he's built, that's not something that just happens overnight. That's more than 10 years in the making, right?
Oh,
you invest in this line.
Andy Reid taught the organization
right.
1999. It's been well over 20 years now. And Howie just learned from Andy. But how I describe it is if you're sitting back there, if you're a GM and you're sitting back there and saying, well, I got a pretty good offensive line, I got a pretty good defensive line, that's the moment you should take another one. Take another one. Keep taking them. The Eagles defensively come at you in waves. I guarantee you they're not happy with the depth on the offensive line. As good as they are with the starters, they're not happy. So you might see them take an offensive lineman at the top of next year's draft. And guess what? People get pissed off again.
But if this is such a proven method to building, if this is such a proven method to roster building, John, and I agree with everything you're saying, but just to put devil's advocate, if this is such a proven method in roster building, why does it seem like it's so hard for organizations like the Chargers, like the Vikings, to follow suit?
Well, also player development comes into it. Evaluation comes into it. The Giants are a perfect example. They drafted, guys in the 1st round. Andrew Thomas has turned into a good player. Evan Neal has not. So you not only have to do it, you got to pick the right guys. So that, it's easier said than done, but your whole focus should be offensive, defensive line first, and then everything else. And by the way, but quarterback aside, obviously you have to have a quarterback, but
quarterback juice is about the O-line though. So
yeah, but you need the quarterback. I mean, the quarterback's the most important position. But other than that, you can have a great quarterback. I don't know what Justin Fields would be behind this offensive line. Maybe he'd turn into a player. So you see quarterbacks ruined all the time by bad offensive lines,
Andrew
bad
Luck.
support systems. Um, but I'm just talking about the value of the position.
Right.
The Eagles, with all due respect to Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and DeAndre Swift, the Eagles run on Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson, Jordan Mailata, Cam Jurgens, and then defensively, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick. That's why they've won 20 of 21 in the regular season with Jalen as the quarterback. Jalen's a big part of it, but that's the reason they've been so successful. And it's not sexy. I mean, I guess the sacks are, but they're not getting sacks this year. But they're getting a hell of a lot of pressures.
And a hell of a lot of forced fumbles. John, they forced 10 fumbles in the past 3 games, and they recovered 6 of them. They've been violent, when it comes to attacking the ball carrier. Sean Desai spoke about this in the offseason, right? One of the biggest things that he spoke about, which kind of endeared him to Eagles fans earlier on, was about creating a defensive identity where opponents are going to feel them every single week. And I don't know, if you ask me, forcing 10 fumbles in 3 weeks, I think the opposing offense is feeling you. And the most recent 2 that caught our attention was by way of Jalen Carter. He punched the ball out of the ball carrier.
That was violent.
That was violent, right? He chose violence.
Yeah. Turnovers. To be honest, turnovers tend to be
random,
not predictable. So
do you think interceptions are more random than forced fumbles?
No, not less either. I don't think, like as violent as that was, if Jalen doesn't hit the football, maybe he gets a 15-yard penalty. He just hit the football on the nose. Look, good players are more apt to create turnovers. He's a phenomenal player. Anybody who has heard me talk about Jalen Carter from day one, I tried to explain to people this guy's different. And I think they already have seen it. So somebody like that is, right now his pass rush win rate is second in the NFL with interior defensive linemen.
I think he even has slightly more pressures than Aaron Donald and has played half of the snaps.
Yeah. I mean, he's second in the league. He's second in win rate to Aaron Donald. He's second in pressures to Javon Hargrave, and he's played less snaps than both of them. But he's just really, really good. So players like that are going to create more havoc. But the randomness of turnovers is real, and you're going to have spikes, and you're going to have ebbs and flows.
This is 2 years in a row of this defense being.
Yeah, but even last year, if you look at it, first half they were off the charts. Second half it slowed down.
Okay.
Regression to the mean, so to speak. Probably going to see the same thing this year. And if they started off slowly, it would be the opposite way. But they're a good team, and they're going to create more than the average team. And they do spend a lot of time on ball security from both offensive and defensive standpoint. So offensive, obviously protecting the ball, defensive, trying to take it away. You have players like Charles Tillman back in the day. Who, it's called the peanut punch now because of Charles Tillman. So, I mean, he was better at it than everybody else. So there's certain players that are certainly better. I think Jalen Carter is going to be one of them. But there is a randomness to turnovers, and you can't really. Let's put it this way: the Eagles aren't game planning, thinking, "Oh, we're going to be +3 every week," because they know that's not going to happen. So, but hey, when you're riding the wave, ride the wave.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're right. As far as what the Eagles plan every week, I think you're right. I don't think the game plan is okay. We want to be +3 in turnovers this week. I don't think that's necessarily what they say. I think if anything, what's said is okay. How can we force them to make more mistakes than usual? I think above all
Well,
else,
yeah,
that's probably the
and you
talking
saw
point.
against Minnesota specifically when you get the football on the ground
And
early.
it's effort plays. There's really a lot of effort as well, which
Yeah.
is important to me because that tells me the defense is responding to what Sean Desai is, I guess, preaching them. I guess you'll say.
Well, the Eagles preach. I mean, they've been preaching it long before Sean got here.
But still, don't you
It's
think Desai has to instill some things? Because in my opinion, he came into a situation with a lot of veterans, and he has to earn their trust and their respect, right? And you've been covering this game a long time. Players, especially veterans, they can sniff out a bullshit artist. You know what I mean? So,
well,
I,
yeah. Well, players are about can you make me better? So that's how coaches sort of earn the respect of players. And Sean's done a very good job. Don't get me wrong, but people put too much emphasis on coaching. Nick says all the time, "Show me, show me a good coach, and I'll show you a bunch of good players," which I've always respected about Nick because he's not smug to himself, thinking, "Oh, I've created this team that's won 20 of 21." The Eagles have better talent than just about everybody they line up against. So if you're talking MVPs, I got that question. Who's the MVP? Who's the MVP of the defense? And I would say to this point, I would say it's Jalen Carter. Who's the MVP of the offense? To this point, I would say the entire offensive line. And because I can't pick out one, but if I had to pick out one, it would probably be Jordan Mailata, or Landon, which is interesting because you typically would think it was Kelsey or Lane. Um, but Kelsey had the flu in Tampa, by the way. That's
oh
one of the
wow, okay.
worst games. Um, it's probably the worst game he'll play all year. Um, but if you ask me who the MVP of this team is, Howie Roseman.
Oh man, on that note, John, my final question before we get out of here. We talked about the defense side of the ball. We talked about how Sean Desai is, for the most part, maximizing getting the most out of his personnel as they possibly can, especially battling the injury bug. The Eagles have had a lot of injuries in the DB room, especially at safety right now. Justin Evans is battling injury right now. We know Reed Blankenship just came back from a rib injury. Next man up, I mean, Terrell Edmonds and Sidney Brown. I think they played fairly well against the Bucks, but if Evans can't suit up, I mean, that makes them weaker in coverage at that position. We saw Sidney Brown; he almost got taken advantage of by Mike Evans, but he recovered. And if he forced Mike Evans to somewhat make a mistake. I'm curious to know what's your thoughts on the safety position right now, knowing what's going on with the injuries, and how do you expect the Philadelphia Eagles to move going forward if Evans can't suit up?
Well, they might not have Evans or Brown this week.
Mm.
So, they would have two safeties. So, you cross your fingers and hope Reed Blankenship and Terrell Edmonds can make it through the game. Um, yeah, so we're going to have to see how things move along this week. Obviously, it's a short week. Justin didn't practice today. Sydney didn't practice today. Um, they don't have, Tristan McCullum is the lone safety on the practice squad. Mekhi Gardner has some versatility. They would certainly have to elevate one of those two if both players can't play, just to have enough bodies. And then you bring in the slot as well because Sydney was playing in the slot in Tampa Bay. So that's how they wanted to move forward. You probably have to move backwards to Mario Goodrich. A lot of people want to see Eli Ricks. Maybe you have to play him at safety. Um, yeah, you don't want to get to that point to where you have to go past Reed Blankenship and Terrell Edmonds. Multiple injuries at the same position is always going to hurt you. Always. It's hurt them at nickel. It'll hurt them at safety. But the good news is pass rush doesn't let anybody get comfortable to throw the ball. Well, I shouldn't say that. Minnesota threw a lot and got a lot of yards. But the Eagles had it was 27-7 in that game when Minnesota started clicking out of desperation. But my only warning to the people is that game gave you an indication that if somebody like Miami or even the Rams can somehow hold up in pass protection, they will make plays against this secondary. That's my biggest concern with that defense. Offensively, I don't have many concerns because they can do everything. They haven't done it yet, but we've already seen them. A.J. Brown didn't get bad overnight. Devontae Smith
Right.
didn't get bad overnight. Dallas Goedert didn't get bad overnight. Jalen Hurts didn't get bad overnight. They have been facing unique defenses, giving them unscouted looks. And again, Dallas talked about that today. And they expect that to stop this week against Washington, a team they're very used to. Maybe if they don't get anything going this week, maybe it's time to panic a little bit. But boy, I find it very hard to panic when they're going to be 4-0.
Oh, okay, John. Well, they're going to be 4-0. I like that. I like that. On that note, you guys, man, smash that like button, man. We appreciate you guys for locking in for as long as you did. We had over 200 people in this live chat, really just going in and locked in on the content. We appreciate you guys so much. Make sure you guys are subscribed to JAKIB Sports. If you guys want more content from John McMullen, you're not just going to check him out on jakibsports.com or just on football 24/7 or just on si.com. He does great work for those guys, by the way, but you're not just going to catch him there. You're going to catch him on Birds 365, right, with Jody Mack. Also, make sure you guys lock in to that program at 8 a.m. Eastern time. Not a moment sooner, not a moment later. 8 a.m. Eastern time, Jody Mack and John McMullen on Birds 365. Check them out on there. Also, make sure you guys check out Derek Gunn and Rob Ellis on Sports Take at 12 p.m. Eastern time. And also go check out Dan Cilio on the National Football Show, and you'll get more content from JAKIB on weekends, especially on game day for the pre, post, and halftime show featuring Seth Joyner, Mike Missinelli, Derek Gunn, Mark Farzetta, John McMullen, Kayla Santiago, Bill Colarulo. It's a huge team out there, you guys. So make sure you guys lock in every game day, every game night. You're going to get great content from that cast of characters. So smash that like button. Stay engaged in the content. You guys were locked in on Football 24/7. He's John McMullen. I'm Tone DeShields II. We'll catch you guys next time.